Thank you guys both for coming today. Bill, congratulations on the 10th anniversary of the letter. Thamara, thank you for joining us here. You're a senior at Hunter, and you're a Rhodes Scholar. First of all, congratulations, one of 32 in the U.S. You'll be in England for 2 years studying at Oxford. What would you tell Thamara as she leaves the school realm and enters the professional realm? What kind of advice would you give her on how she should think about guiding her career?
Well, certainly there will be more data to take these questions of social science and education and sort of say, what pathways are working and what pathways aren't working. And so, getting interested in data and how we can find patterns in data, it's not necessarily to be a computer scientist or anything, but the social sciences will be way more data driven. I don't think there's any risk that this idea of looking at outcomes and helping things be more just, there are going to be plenty of jobs. The world will be richer, hopefully in many countries, and at most times that extra resource will be applied towards these issues of equity that have been so entrenched and so difficult. I don't think any robot's going to be doing any of the things that she aspires to do. And, my overall view of AI is that it's, 90% good. And if government takes advantage of the new opportunities, it's 95% good.
McKinsey had a report recently that said by 2030, about a third of people in advanced economies will have to totally change occupations. That it's not a question of jobs disappearing, but a question of jobs just fundamentally changing. Are you ready for that? Do you think your peers are ready for it? How do you guys think about it?
I think we have the benefit of having grown up in a generation where we were introduced to a lot of change and technology all at once. So I think we're a lot less hesitant to adapt to changes in technology, which I think will only work to our benefit in the long run. Whether it's, socially or professionally, I think we are a lot less resistant to those changes and a lot more adept at adapting with those changes when they come. So I know people who got into college and wanted to be, physics majors. And there's a traditional way to learn that. But nowadays, physics majors have to code a lot. So they take computer science courses. They learn how to code to get their results about what they're looking at in space. And they, host hack days and things like that. So I think every field is adjusting. And I think our generation is apt to adjust along with it.
Thamara's senior thesis is on Black Lives Matter, and there is a great line in it where you talk about how a hashtag turned into a movement. First, why don't you talk a little bit about how you think the role of philanthropy or giving should exist in an activist-driven world like that, and then I would love to hear if it's changed the way you see how you give your money.
I think what you're seeing with not only Black Lives Matter, but just a lot of the social movements that are coming out of a social media age is that there's less hierarchy within those systems. Again, to your point, things are spread out across the nation and people have the ability to mobilize and specifically target the issues that are locally affecting them. So I think any effort that can just work to listen and understand the local problems that are happening and give people who are familiar with those problems the resources to help fix it is ideal. Just allowing people to be the writers of their own narrative and helping them bolster what they need to accomplish rather than taking it over is ideal, I think, in those spaces.
Well, a lot of these movements are political, so it's not so much about money as it is about getting out and voting for candidates that embody the values that you believe in. And it would be great if the voting rates of minorities, the voting rates of young people would go up to match or exceed the older groups who, in a democracy, they are more represented because they vote. And, so hopefully these movements at least will take that primary role of democracy, both have candidates and votes that can advance these things.
And what about in a leaderless activity like this? Sure, a lot of it's political, but also maybe speaks to a larger idea of being able to spark awareness or change through people coming together but not having a particular leader. Do you see that worldwide?
Well, a lot of online engagement is very light engagement. It's not like kids who went down and spent years in the South dealing with segregation and put their lives at risk. Online, the risk is that there's so many different movements that you're engaged for a bit in one, but then the next one comes along. So this generation has to define, how they draw activism in. I tend to think that having leaders is a good thing. Maybe they'll prove me wrong.
I do think people do underestimate the ability that social media has to mobilize people who are on the ground. So I think you brought up Ferguson, and that's a perfect example. A lot of media attention was focused on Ferguson in those first days. And for better or worse, that media attention was both positive and negative in a lot of different spaces. But the people who were on the ground in Ferguson were there for months. And I don't think that got as much media coverage. And I think a lot of what happens in social media is giving people the ability to collaborate when it comes to just activism in general. So I know there is the idea that there's this culture of clicktivism, we like things and we post things, but then that's where the activism stops. And I think social media does have a powerful way of allowing people to get collective action on the ground in a way they didn't have access to before. And I think that's coming up in our politics too. If you look at the last election season and how many people of color, trans women, women in general got out to actually, hold office. I think the traditional model is, again, mobilizing the vote, but actually getting people who represent you through your identity and through your ideas in the office is something that's happening. It happened a couple months ago, and I think it's going to happen in 2018. In November, when it comes to our elections, there are more women running than ever before. And I think the ability people have now to directly have access to people who would be their supporters in a way they might have not before, even if they don't have as much money as traditional candidates would, is essentially really important. And I don't think we should, underestimate the power of social media to, I guess, start from give power to movements that start at the ground level.
Something that's been coming up quite frequently is this question of universal basic income or guaranteed income. Would love to hear both of your perspectives on the idea of giving towards people. Either everyone gets a certain amount, or if you make less than $50,000, you get $500 a month, let's say. Just getting the money, no strings attached, no questions asked, you just get it.
I think going to Hunter, you have the really unique experience of meeting non-traditional students. So we live and work in New York City. It's an extremely expensive city. I, for example, have a full scholarship, but that doesn't, cover my money for groceries or books at every, the beginning of every semester. So I think when we think about the hurdles to, graduating from high school and graduating from college, a part of that is being able to afford to spend time on your education and afford to give your education as much attention as it deserves. So something like a basic standard income for everyone, I think, would help a lot of people just focus their time and attention to things that would help improve their life in the long run versus, having to parse out that time and perhaps make sacrifices and extend their time in college or having to drop out of high school because the economic foundation wasn't there for them to achieve those goals.
Well, it's a simple matter of resources. Do we have so much resource that somebody who's able-bodied, has no children to take care of, that we should divert resources to them and not expect them to work to live at a certain level, while the safety net for single mothers, kids with special needs, older people, take anything, housing, food, we don't have enough that we're taking care of those needs. And if you take away the productivity where you're saying, hey, you don't need to work at all to make this level of income, then the goods and services in the society are quite a bit less than they would have been otherwise. Someday we will be that rich, either one or two generations from now, with the types of improvements we have. So it's fine to debate this, but when we're falling short of helping out those who can't work, on very basic needs. The idea you should create some new class of entitlement called healthy person who doesn't feel like working seems like a big mistake.
And even if it's not so much that it doesn't, that you still have to work. It just is a extra something that comes to you to maybe not have to make a decision between buying groceries or.
But to whom? The question is, does it go? Our safety net's not good enough today. And unless you found a gold mine that you want to tell us about, these are all zero-sum trade-offs. There is finite resources in the world. And so, go visit those people I visited in Atlanta and meet them where they are single mothers dealing with kids' challenges and no real problems. If you have some new class of recipient, which are, single able-bodied people that are in the job market today, and you want to say, no, don't work. Don't work. We don't need nurses and teachers and drivers and things like that. You must be working off a different economic equation, or you must be taking it away from those who are less able. The safety net has gone up in this country, thank goodness. Over the last 100 years, it's gone from nothing to modest. It's very complicated because it's very vertical. The amount of forms you have to fill out and things, makes it hard to access for some people. But we're just not rich enough to say that, you want to screw around? Hey, no sweat. Hey, we'll make sure you have a good time, and we'll give a little bit less to these people who have serious needs.
Well, I just think to your point, and I can see you thinking through the logistics, which is why you are you, and we are probably thinking, idealistically. But I think to your point, it's a lot about making sure those single mothers and those people who are struggling have just like a little bit more, because those people are, perfectly able-bodied and they're working, but wages are low and rents are high and, things are hard for everyone. So I think to the extent that we can help even those people more and help everyone more is ultimately, ideally, the goal.
Maybe this is a tough question that you can tackle next year.
Well, there are policies like the earned income tax that actually could be made way more generous, that help people who work not be so resource constrained, and particularly when you apply that to households where there's children. That's a very positive program, but it's not universal. It is a targeted thing.
Bill, Thamara, thank you very much for joining us today. This was terrific.